Welcome to the BIM Heroes webinar series on leadership. I'm Larry Bridgesmith and honored to serve as the chairman of the BIM Heroes Leadership Council. I'm also a professor of law at Vanderbilt Law School in Nashville, Tennessee, here in the USA, and I'm the lead of artificial intelligence strategy for Guardrails Technology, a provider of the Guardrail Responsible AI platform. BIM Heroes is a global group of professionals engaged in the delivery of professional and support services to the architecture, engineering, and construction industry. Most of the members are experts in the field of BIM, or Building Information Management, and we work to become a decentralized or non-hierarchical association with the intentions to form a decentralized autonomous organization, or DAO, by which decision-making is distributed across the association and driven by a consensus-building technology of blockchain, smart contracts, and non-fungible tokens. You can go to their website at www.bimhero.io and learn more about us. But our week 6 webinar features two of our most active members and my esteemed colleagues on the BIM Heroes Leadership Council, Natasha Prinsloo and Daniel Stevens. Natasha, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. So I'm obviously Natasha. I work as a BIM manager at a consultancy for WP3, and obviously a member of BIM Heroes. And yeah, that's...
And where's your office? In what part of the world are you?
London. Sorry, London. Based in London.
We all stretch so far across the globe, it's easy to forget.
Exactly. Yeah.
Hey, Daniel, please tell us a little bit about yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Daniel Steven. I am based in Nigeria. Recently completed my undergraduate studies in building technology and engineering. I'm proud to be a member of BIM Heroes and to be actively involved in the Leadership Council. I also represent the Nigerian community and the Pan-African group, coordinating the African meetings and the Nigerian community as well.
Well, that's a large assignment of responsibilities, but knowing you, Daniel, you are up for it. You absolutely take on any challenge. So thank you for your leadership as well. And I just have to say, absolutely. I just have to say it's been such a delight to work with the two of you and others like you, because we have a leadership value that we are seeking to ensconce, to embed within the BIM Heroes. And today, this is the 6th of 12 Leadership Council interviews such as this. And we're today addressing the issue and the opportunities of ethical leadership. In other words, how do we make wise choices that balance values, complexity, and the impact of those decisions? And we're going to explore how our values become visible through our decisions, not just the big ones, but the everyday choices that shape the culture and the trust and the collective coherence of the organization itself. In other words, how do we balance short-term needs with long-term consequences? And when do we choose principle over our preferences or mutual benefit rather than our personal agenda? Every organization is challenged by those issues. And this isn't about perfection. It's about responsibility, humility, and the courage to choose what's right, even when it's hard. And in decentralized contexts, such as the BIM Heroes DAO, where authority is distributed across the organization, and transparency, accountability, and responsibility are expected each of each other, ethical leadership isn't optional, it's essential. So let's kick it off. Let me ask Natasha, when you think of ethical leadership, what is your take on what it means to lead with integrity, regardless of the policies?
So for me, on a day-to-day leadership perspective, I think, ethics shows up in small decisions, how you allocate resources, you back in a disagreement, how you respond when a team member makes a mistake. You know, it's easy to think of ethics as being a big ticket issue, fraud, bribery, but the real test is usually subtle. You know, do you take credit or pass it on? Do you speak when somebody's excluded? Do you admit when your call wasn't the right one, for instance? You know, the signs like ethical leadership, you know, is consistent, you know, even under being consistently, even being under pressure. Unethical leadership is you're spotted in excuses, double standards, and a culture of fear and even silence. So that's my
And
perspective.
I think we've all been parts of organizations that exactly work like that. And that's the remarkable thing about BIM Heroes. We seek to be different. We seek to banish the idea of command and control and instead function collaboratively rather than hierarchically. So, Daniel, when you think of ethics, what does the real world look like? How does ethics show up in day-to-day leadership, not just on our principles and policy page? What is real day-to-day leadership look like?
Well, that's a very great question because ethics actually goes beyond policies and what it looks like in the organization. And ethics basically means doing the right thing, even when it's hard. That's what it means, personally, for me. And that's because we see ethical decisions being made every day, not just in the organizations and in the offices, but in the personal decisions that we as individuals choose to make every day. Um, and ethics could be hard. It could be hard because um, the easy way to do things would be unethical. Unethical decisions are made based on personal interest, where you want to take advantage of others, you know the right thing to do, but you don't want to do it. And it's easier to be unethical. But when it comes to being ethical, especially in leadership, it's about doing the right thing, even when it's hard. And Natasha said something about being under pressure to make decisions like accountability and being honest. It's actually very, very real and very valid because when you personally experience tough decision making that either benefits you as a person at the cost of others, then that's the real test in making ethical decisions. So I think it actually spans beyond the organizations and teams to even our everyday lives.
Well, that is so properly stated. And I know we think in terms of ethics as some policy manual that we go to. And we know that it's much more personal than that. And because when we act unethically, and we can do so on a daily basis by misrepresentation, by failing to step up to our assumed responsibilities, all of those are ethical challenges that are really in the fabric of the people and the organization. And Natasha, what do you think the signs of unethical versus ethical leadership amount to? How do you know when behaviors are taking place that really present the problem of ethics?
Oh, it's such an open-ended question. So I think, you know, I'll just maybe just, you know, I was part of a situation once. Maybe that would be a better way to explain it. We were in a design meeting, and one of the colleagues were constantly being talked over, and she was a junior member, especially when she shared her ideas. It wasn't aggressive per se, but it was consistent, and it was subtle enough that others started leaving her out of the key conversations.
Mhm.
No, and I remember sitting during one meeting, like knowing I should say something, but wrestling with the idea that, you know, there's a discomfort of speaking up. But in the end, I did choose to gently call out and redirect the conversation back to her. It was awkward, but then the dynamic shifted after that. And that moment taught me that silence can feel safer, right?
Mhm.
But it often comes at a cost of integrity and inclusion.
Mhm.
So, it's hard because I think as a senior, even by not addressing that, you can be seen as unethical, right? Because you do have a responsibility and you do need to speak up, especially for people that feel they don't have a voice, because unfortunately some people do feel they don't have a voice. So, and I think that would be my answer. So you either have a choice, because it's not always loudly spoken, right? So I can choose to not say something, and that would be unethical, right?
Mhm.
And by saying something, it is more ethical. And that's what I said in my
Well,
first point. It doesn't have to be about fraud and, all of this. It's more about how you present yourself and how you can help people around you, to lift them up.
well, that's really well said. And it just shows how personal our ethical decisions are in the moment. And I know personally, as a lawyer representing management, I have had many, many opportunities to go along with a management desire to do something that would harm either the business, the customer, or the employees. And do you stand up even though your revenue depends upon satisfying that client? Do you just go along, or do you try to help them understand the consequences of an unethical decision? And certainly I've been faced with that. Daniel, do you have any examples of ethical issues that you've confronted, just to show how it's all about day-to-day real world challenges?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the opportunity to work with a firm during the period where I was being exposed to the industry work. And myself and some of my colleagues in school, we had some time to get that work experience and to really understand what the industry is like. And a certain junior professional, came across a procurement receipt that required him to falsify some of the numbers so that the supervisors and the firm would get the large government contract. So he was to falsify those figures so that they would be able to get the contract, and the deadline was really unrealistic. But just trying to make up all that numbers and facts just to get the work. And I had to watch closely, and he wanted to speak up because he says, well, this isn't right. We are trying to falsify these numbers and these figures just to get this opportunity and get this contract from the government. But then what is the cost? It's going to cost us something. And that moment really taught me something, because when he spoke up about it, he was told that you are in no place to challenge what the upper management wants to do. You're a junior staff and you just have to stick to the guidelines that have been given to you. That's a dilemma, to want to stand for what is right or stand with the organization and the upper management. And I also witnessed the same similar situation, but in a much more transparent way, because another firm had that same experience. But this time around, they encouraged um, ethical reflection sessions where even making it open to everyone to talk about what they sense might be unethical. And when I asked, I said, why does your firm encourage ethical reflections? Because not every firm wants the junior staff to talk about the unethical practices. And they said in their firm, they want to uphold their values to the highest form, and they understand the short term implications and the long term implications. In the short run, The firm that falsifies the figures gets the contract, but they lose their reputation down the line. But then the firm that chooses to stand for what is right and reflect on ethical practices, they might lose out on some contracts because they are being honest and truthful. But in the long run, it builds the reputation as well as the loyalty of the team. So I think that was a very interesting experience for me to have learned from both sides how they handled a real world ethical challenge. It was very insightful. It was a very insightful learning for me.
Well, I appreciate that candor and that example because it certainly points out how doing it fast is always a tension with doing it right. And when we put profit over people, then we've got a real problem because those are consequences that come to rest on the organization and they impact the value of the reputation of the organization and the quality of the work that they do. I work in the world of artificial intelligence, and there's been a lot of talk about responsible AI. And there is a whole world full of people using AI to their advantage and to the disadvantage of either their customers or the people that they serve. There was an article, a white paper put out by the World Digital Ethicists yesterday that said that the return on investment for responsible AI is about 4 times greater than the shortcuts that many artificial intelligence platforms deliver. But that's not in the short run. It's in the long run. It's about the reputation of the company. It's about the quality of its services. It's about the protection of its people and giving the opportunity for their customers and the people in the organization to thrive, much like Natasha said, and just like you've indicated, Daniel. So what do we do when loyalty to a person clashes with loyalty to the principles of our own ethical standards and the ethics of our organization? Do we put people over principles? How do we deal with our loyalty to one individual or a group of individuals within an organization? Who wants to take that one on?
I don't mind, Daniel. We can both have a go, I suppose.
Natasha, you could go first.
Okay. So for me, loyalty versus principle. So I once, I'm going to go to another story again because I think it's easier to explain. I once worked under a senior leader who was incredibly respected in the company. But behind closed doors, I think a lot of people can agree with this. Within their certain companies, they had really bad behavior, very dismissive, sometimes even borderline unethical, with dealing with clients' expectations. And as someone in a senior level, I constantly felt torn. Do you stay loyal and avoid rocking the boat? Or do you act on what you know is right? So eventually I chose to escalate the specific issue quietly through the proper internal processes. I can tell you it wasn't easy, but by protecting the team's integrity, mattered more. And that experience helps shape how I lead today. Knowing that principles can't be optional just because somebody holds power. Right. So that's my perspective on it.
Well, I've got to say, after living in organizational worlds for all my career, that's a rare principle that you just embraced. And I respect you for it because it's not easy to take that approach. No. It's not always fun.
It can break your career. I mean, there's so many things that can happen, but
right.
I suppose you have to start somewhere, right? You need people to make that change.
Exactly, and demonstrate that change. And so thank you for your example. Daniel, you have anything to relate to that question of loyalty to a person versus your ethical response to a situation?
Yeah, mine might come a little bit slightly a little bit slightly different from the example Natasha gave. I had a discussion with a friend who was so loyal to his company. You know, he's a team member, and I asked him. I said, "Why are you so loyal to your company, your team?" And so many other companies in the same business in the same sector as yours, they, they, it was a period where there were lots of layoffs. So I was just wondering why his company hadn't laid off people as other companies in their sector were doing during that period. And he said that during that difficult moment, that his boss had made the decision, the founder had made the decision that he's going to choose people over the profit target, to cut down the costs and lay off the staff. He said he would choose to retain the people. And at the time, it didn't make any sense because ideally, what other competitors and what other clients were expecting was that they would also lay off, just like how other companies in their own business were laying off. And then I asked him, I said, how did this turn out? He said it was really difficult. It was really difficult because they should have cut costs by laying off, but the founder chose to retain the talents in spite of that hard, very difficult decision to make. And he had a one-on-one conversation with the founder, and he said that he prioritizes people over the profit targets because in the short run, it's going to hurt the business. The costs were difficult to manage, but in the long run, it's going to pay off because he's going to build a workforce and a team of people who are strongly loyal to the business. And years down the line, that was their experience. They had a very strong team, strong workforce with so much loyalty and commitment to this founder and this vision, just because they watched him make a tough decision during a very, very difficult time. So it was one lesson that really taught me a lot when it comes to making tough decisions in terms of loyalty versus the principles and the approach that other um, businesses in your line of work might be taking when times are really hard.
Well, you stated it extraordinarily well, and it really raises the issue of leading under pressure, because when profits and shareholder rights and interests clash with ethics, it's really tough to lead under that kind of pressure. So,
Yeah.
Natasha, what keeps you anchored when no one's watching? How do you maintain an ethical balance if it's in secret?
Yeah, so I use a mix, so I'd be like, would I be proud of this tomorrow? You know, that's one thing I always ask myself. And I think it's one thing a lot of people should ask themselves, right, when making a decision. The sleep test, for instance, if it costs me sleep, there's probably something off. Right. So if I'm not going to sleep well at night, I know that a decision I made is not correct. I suppose stakeholder impact lens, I mentally map who gains and who loses, and what precedents I'm setting. In the ANC and procurement especially, ethic connects directly to delivery quality. And a dodgy procurement shortcut can lead to poor safety. It can lead to compliance issues or downstream disasters. So ethics isn't just a virtue, it's a risk. It's a risk management. And for me, it's a transparency lens. Would I be comfortable if the decision was public, like truly public, or on LinkedIn or in court, and also try to remove ego from any decision that I make. Would I be comfortable if the decision, I strip away pride or fear of being wrong and ask what's right for the project, the team, and for the long term. And also tools. We've all seen the code of conducts, and some are meaningful, some are meaningful, and others are wallpaper. But what works in living those values in process, is in process design. Who signs off? Who reviews? How we embed checks and reward accountability. It's not just an output, basically. Sorry, very long-winded.
No, but it's so informative,
Yeah.
Natasha, because you referenced the fact that can I sleep at night, right? Others might say, would my mother be proud of me? Others might say,
exactly.
If the light were shining on me, what would I do, right?
Yeah.
So Daniel, are there any tools or models or frameworks that you rely on to be sure that your decisions and behavior are ethical?
Yeah, I do have to. I do have to. My mother should be proud of me, like Larry said. She should be proud of me. But then one of my tools or frameworks in staying anchored is my spiritual belief system. Because I have a spiritual belief system, my connection with God is one of the strongest anchors that I have that helps me, because that is the compass that helps me to move. That is a compass that helps me to, because when I want to go with popular opinions, sometimes I don't know what is true and what is right and what to actually stand for and defend. But as long as I'm aligned with my spiritual compass, I get clarity. I get all the clarity that I need, even if it means standing alone. And so that is one tool and framework that helps me to stay anchored when I'm faced with tough decisions to make. And also, when I think about this decision that I'm making, as tough as it may seem, if I was at the receiving end, how would I feel? If someone were to make this decision over my life, how would I feel? What impact is it going to make? So I try the empathy test to weigh both sides of it, because sometimes it's easy to just make decisions based on what you think, and you don't place yourself in the other person's place to really understand what it would feel like if you were in that position. So I use the empathy test and I use my spiritual belief system to stay grounded and anchored when I feel really, really stressed by making hard decisions.
Well, that's very commendable, and we all can learn from that. We all have an ethics system. We may not see it as a framework, we may not see it as controlling, but we're all going to act and behave as we believe the best outcomes will occur. Unfortunately, often that's for us individually at the expense of others. So it's when you bring that collective value of the value of our decisions to the group that the real tests occur. So anything that you've learned from dealing with the fear of being wrong or the fear of being exposed by virtue of being ethical in contrast to decisions that others would like you to make? How have you dealt with that pressure to do the right thing rather than just avoid doing the wrong thing? Natasha, you're smiling.
Natasha, you're smiling. You should go first.
Um, you know, silence is also a decision, right? I want to stick by that. And by not acting, you're still making a choice.
Mm.
And sometimes the loudest form of leadership is a quiet no.
Mm.
And that's, yeah, I'm going to stick with that. I'm going to stick
Well,
with that.
there's so much wisdom in that. We have, at least in the US, I'm sure other cultures around the world have become so self-focused,
Yes.
and we are fiercely independent to the detriment of others, that just not being heard sometimes on a matter can be a very valuable and courageous thing to do.
Yeah.
Um, I also think of the way in which, as individuals, as part of organizations, ask themselves, how is this decision going to impact the purposes of the organization, the purposes of the people, customers, shareholders, other employees, and so forth? So having that perspective, it allows us to then apply to the logistical things of the work that we do, like delivery or procurement or the digital tools that we use. That's where the ethics really matters a significant degree. So what are the links that we have to those logistical parts of the work that we do with ethical decision making?
What are the links?
Yeah, what are the links to project delivery and procurement or the digital tools that we use? How do they play into the impact of our ethical decisions, even at the practical level? It would seem to me that, for example, to satisfy a customer, you obviously want to maintain their confidence in your project delivery schedule. You want them to trust you as a provider, that your word is your bond. And so sometimes we are tempted, if you will, to fudge the numbers in order to keep the client happy or the shareholders happy. And in procurement, we may be tempted to cut the corners with respect to quality and price and knowledge of the impact of a poor procurement decision on the ultimate service or delivery of product. So you referenced it before, Natasha. Are codes of conduct of value? Is it a framework from which we can work? I know it is easy for those to become wallpaper, as you said, but can they help us?
I think it can help. You know, the one thing about, we're speaking about AI and, all these tools, but it always comes down to the human choice, right? So if you're going to use AI, right, and you can punch in that you're only going to win this contract or whatever based on these, it doesn't always work that way because people can manipulate that. And I think that this is where the human part comes in. You need to have people that have ethics. You have to have people that know right from wrong. And it's it's a difficult question. I don't know. I don't think we can always rely on software and processes, because people can manipulate those processes, right? People want to, maybe I'll give them this because then we can gain that, and it's a hard one. It's just it's all about just being better. I think people need to step up, because you can clearly see when something has been unethical, right? You can see because buildings, they stop at a certain point. There's no more money. This has happened. Then they have to, the design of the building or whatever, like they have to take shortcuts, and that's because in the beginning, somebody did something, and it carries on the whole process instead of just being open and transparent. And everybody wants to give, a piece of everything to everybody they know to keep everybody happy. And there comes a point where you can't do that.
Well, I want to go back to your comment about being still in the presence of groupthink, because there are some people that just need to be the smartest person in every room, and therefore the battle is on for their ego's sake. But sometimes the smartest person in every room is the one that can learn something of value from everyone else in the room. That proves to be the smartest person. 100%. So the work in AI has taught me that there is a great temptation for all of us to use those as a crutch, to use those platforms and tools as a crutch. And the evidence is that if we choose to do that, we're negatively impacting the way in which we engage with truth, with ethical behavior. We're just giving over our decisions to a machine
Exactly.
that doesn't have any sense of ethics, that doesn't have any sense of honor and trustworthiness. So we live in a dangerous time
We do.
that AI can actually do harm to the benefits that it should be providing. And we as individuals have to live by an ethical code that says, I'm not going to copy and paste. I'm going to look and discover and exchange my insights and expertise, even with artificial intelligence. So we're going to move somewhat toward the end, but I would like to know from both of you, what is one non-negotiable for you when it comes to ethical leadership? It's so foundational to you, it would not be compromised.
Okay, just before I respond to that, I wanted to say something about the question you had asked Natasha before,
Okay.
about code of conduct, if it helps or if it's just a wallpaper. All right. I think code of conducts really help. They are very, very important because they can be likened to guardrails. I got this illustration from a movie that I had watched where I got to understand the importance of the guardrails that are by the roadside, to avoid vehicles that speed from going off the road, maybe into the water or over a ditch. And so those guardrails actually provide what I call boundaries. It's basically telling people or telling drivers, in the case of those who drive, don't go overboard. Just stay here. Try not to go overboard. Don't go beyond the guardrails for your own good. And it can be likened to raising a child. You have a little child and you tell the child, don't go there, don't do this. And they want to try it. So they try to go off the boundary, and the consequence is harmful to them. So you putting up the code of conduct or the guardrails, you're not doing the child or the company or the team any harm. You're just saying, for our own good and for us to be on the same page, let's not go out of the boundary. Let's stay here and do great work together. So I wanted to add that because it's very important to see code of conduct as very important and very helpful, and not as wallpaper. And then for me, a non-negotiable, when it comes to ethics, is integrity. If you say you are this, then be that. Because someone tells you, oh, I am this and I am that, and you get to meet the person and you meet someone entirely different. And it's very stressful. It's very damaging to reputation to be someone on the inside and be a different person on the outside. And we have cases like this today in our digital world because most of us work remote teams, and you talk to someone and they are different online or when you work with them remotely, and then you meet them in person and their character is absolutely different. It's so it's a non-negotiable for me. Integrity is about being upright. If this is who you say you are, then be it. And if you're not a kind person, state it early. I am an unkind person, and I am a lazy team member. So I will not portray myself to be a hardworking person when I know I will drag the team behind. I was coordinating a team of people, and someone told me I won't be able to meet up with the deadline you've set for us. I'm just telling you this so I don't drag the team behind. And I was very grateful because he came and told me the truth. He didn't pose and say, I am going to do this. And then down the line, I discover he's dragging the team behind. So I think integrity and honesty are non-negotiables because it builds trust, and is such a great capital and asset in our world today that it's hard it's hard to build, and it's very easy to destroy and damage. So trust is very important, and integrity and honesty helps to build trust. So these are non-negotiables for me.
Well, I appreciate that, and it reminds me of a great management theory book. It's called The 5 Dimensions of a Team, written by Patrick Lencioni. And he creates a pyramid with 5 layers. And the top layer is performance, getting things done well, getting it done right, getting it done efficiently, effectively, profitably. But you have foundational layers. And the basic foundation of an effective team is trust. Don't expect that you can ever get to the top level without having a relationship of trust. And as you say, Daniel, that's about our own integrity and the way in which we behave consistent with what we say. And when we say and do something different, we've inhibited, we've detrimented our trust. And trust once lost is really hard to regain, because now we have a reputation for being untrustworthy. So I really appreciate the observation about integrity. I'm going to ask the audience if they have any questions of these 2 experts to please put them in the chat, and we'll be sure to pass them on. But before we close, let's talk about the real tough issues. And one of them is ethical leadership harder now than it used to be? Is it becoming more difficult to become ethical, to be consistently ethical in our behavior? And if so, what factors are driving that?
Well, I would say it's more visible now. The tech, social media, public accountability. So the stakes are a lot higher now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the stakes are much higher because our economy is moving fast.
Yes,
we're moving at breakneck speed in terms of developing our technologies. And so what was sound and safe today may not be tomorrow. And that does make it harder. What do you think, Daniel? Is it harder to do? And what's causing that?
Yeah, I think in a way it's both ways. It's harder. There's an aspect to it that is harder, and there's an aspect to it that is easier these days. Like Natasha pointed out, technology helps it to become more visible. But I think it's harder these days because we are in an era where the popular opinions and the majority actually, the majority direction actually counts. So if you are standing by the side as a minority, then you are perceived to be alone on the losing side. And so it's harder to be more ethical now because we have like a groupthink mentality that drives everyone. And so even without verifying certain information and certain contexts, everyone just moves with the tide, moves with the popular opinions. And so it's harder now because to make an ethical decision in leadership, you must be willing to stand alone. If you're standing for what is right, you must be willing to stand alone. So it's harder, much more now than it used to be. With technology and everything, we see that popular opinions and where the majority leads is approved or accepted to be the right trajectory. So it's kind of getting a little bit complex and complicated with technology and the way our generation is wired to think and approach decisions in these days.
Well, and I can't imagine a more pivotal time. I mean, we are now facing what is equivalent to an industrial revolution. And that means critical decisions need to be made quickly. They need to be made ethically. And if we're rushing to get to a right decision for the sake of anything other than the ethical benefits and challenges of the moment, then we're probably cutting corners that are going to cost in the long run. And that's really tough. Natasha, you mentioned inclusion earlier. We have a question for Mortaji. He wants to know about mutual acceptance. And how do we build trust from mutual acceptance?
Okay, well, I think mutual acceptance creates the foundation for ethical leadership. When people feel seen and respected, trust naturally flows. It's not just about agreeing with each other, but being willing to understand and value different perspectives. The mutual respect gives us space to act with integrity, especially with difficult decisions, when difficult decisions come up. And and this also leads me on to, we're talking about non-negotiable, non-negotiable and ethical leadership, and Daniel was speaking about integrity. And one for me, based on mutual acceptance is consistency. Ethics isn't just about the grand gestures. It's about making the right call over and over again. So I hope that answers your question.
Oh, that's very well said. And I just have to say, knowing the two of you like I do, we are so fortunate to have the benefit of leaders like you at BIM Heroes. Thank you so much for your contributions. And as we close, I'd just like to ask a question of how you would sum it up. If you were to describe the character of ethical leadership in a sentence, it can be a long sentence, not in a word, but in a sentence. How would you sum up the character of ethical leadership? Daniel, you want to run with that one?
Daniel?
Okay, so to sum it up in a sentence, I would say that ethical leadership is standing alone. Standing for what is right, even if it means standing alone. And sometimes you as a person could be perceived to be foolish and unwise because it costs you so much in the short run, yes, but then in the long run it actually puts you on a better light as someone who is truly upright and a person of integrity. And so standing for what is right, even if it means standing alone, even if it means that it costs you so much in the short term, but in the long run it's actually very much rewarding. That's my take.
Well, standing alone is really difficult, but if we're going to be the ethical leader, we need to be prepared to do that if needed. You're absolutely right. Natasha, how would you sum up that question? What is ethical leadership?
To me, because, we were talking about, how do I say this? The code of conduct, right? So I just want to kind of just go back to that again. Because the thing is, a lot of companies, you'll go in and then you'll do a little course. They've got their own little course on, how they would like, you to represent yourself within the company and all that. But, the thing is, you can teach, you can have tools and you can have awareness, right? But values, that is a lived experience. Okay, so so for me, answering that question is, you need to be aware of your surroundings. You need to know what is going on. And if you feel in your gut something is not right, as hard as it may be, you need to speak up, right? You don't have to speak up in front of an entire, within a meeting, but you can take it outside and go up the ladder if you don't feel comfortable in an open environment. But I think what people need to do is they need to start standing up, because people do know right from wrong. And I think people just need to, the world is in a mess, right? Let's just be honest. And I think people just need to, it's up to us. Everybody makes a decision every day, and nobody wants to wake up and, do horrible things. Okay, not all of us, right? But I think it's important that, we have to change how we lead, how we interact with people, and seeing if something is wrong, how can we fix this?
Well, I can safely say with great confidence that we are all privileged to have leaders like you. BIM Heroes is in good hands when people like you are helping us move down that path of ethical leadership. So having said that, I think we'll bring this session to a close and invite everybody to return next week at the same time on the same day for the next chapter in leadership and what are its characteristics and traits. And our thanks to Natasha and Daniel for being such excellent examples of what they're speaking about. And that consistency and integrity of which they speak is certainly obvious in the world that they live in and in the role that they play. So thanks to all. Appreciate you.
Thank
Thank
you,
you,
everyone.
Larry.
Thank
Thank
you.
you,
Thanks,
everyone.
Larry. Appreciate it. Thank you, Daniel.